Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that's, well, it's as harrowing as it is completely inspiring. I want you to picture this. It's a typical Wednesday morning in Delhi. It's about 8:30 a.m. People are just waking up, grabbing breakfast, maybe heading out for medical appointments. The Hauz Rani area is buzzing, right? Just like any other day. And then, out of nowhere, in an absolute flash, a terrifying crisis hits. A 6-story bed and breakfast literally turns into an inferno. But today, we're not just unpacking a disaster. We're looking at the unbelievable, spontaneous bravery of everyday folks. We're talking about the guardians of Hauz Rani.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Through smoke and screams, Hauz Rani residents rushed to save lives. You know, when a massive fire breaks out, the immediate instinct for almost all of us is to run away, right? To get to safety and just wait for the pros, the firefighters, the paramedics. But in those absolute life-or-death minutes before the sirens could even be heard, the locals in this neighborhood did the exact opposite. They ran straight into the danger. They literally charged into the smoke and toward the screams. The stakes could not have been higher, and the chaos was just absolute.
Section 1. The Hauz Rani Fire and being completely trapped without an exit. So, let's break down the sheer nightmare of this building's layout. This hotel was right near Max Hospital, a major facility in Delhi. Because of that, most of the guests weren't your typical tourists, they were foreign nationals on medical visas. We're talking about patients and their families, folks who are already physically vulnerable, dealing with illnesses or recovering from treatments. Now contrast that highly vulnerable group with the absolute structural trap they were stuck in. It's a 6-story building with 0 emergency staircases. And get this, only one common exit. Think about that for a second. One single door for a 6-story building. Some rooms didn't even have windows, and the ones that did, completely jammed shut or made of unbreakable glass. It's basically a sealed box.
So, the clock hits 8:30 a.m. and the fire breaks out, spreading like wildfire across 3 entire floors. Moments later, this thick, blinding smoke just completely swallows the building. Imagine the sheer terror for those patients inside. No emergency stairs, a single blocked exit, absolute panic sets in. But here is where the story shifts. The most absolutely crucial window of time happens before the fire tenders even show up, before any official help arrives on the scene. The local community, shopkeepers, neighbors, people just walking by, they realize that if they don't act that very second, the people inside simply won't survive.
Moving on to Section 2, locals become first responders.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the narrative totally shifts from pure tragedy to just extraordinary action. These locals didn't just stand around in shock. They actually executed this improvised, multi-step rescue operation totally on the fly. First, they grabbed mattresses and spread them on the street below to soften the fall for people who literally had no choice but to jump. Second, they physically fought the building, smashing open those jammed, stubborn windows to create escape routes. And third, the second victims were out, these locals were carrying them away from the flames, dropping to the pavements, perform CPR, and then coordinating with emergency teams the second they finally showed up.
15. That one number perfectly captures the quick thinking of just a single individual in this massive community effort. Meet Riazuddin. He's a 61-year-old shopkeeper who runs a little roadside spot right across from the burning building. The second he saw what was going down, he bolted to his shed and dragged out 15 mattresses. 15! He hauled them across the street and lined them up right beneath the windows.
Riazuddin actually recounted this later, saying, "I laid out around 15 mattresses. One man who rolled over from the second floor broke his leg. Everything was extremely tense." I really want you to absorb that. People are literally rolling and jumping out of second-story windows just to avoid burning alive. And even hitting those mattresses, the impact was brutal enough to snap bones. But there's Riazuddin, at 61 years old, right in the thick of it, doing absolutely everything in his power to give these desperate people a fighting chance.
8. And that brings us to another incredible local hero, Mohammed Israr Khan. While Riazuddin was setting up those landing zones outside, Mohammed was dealing with the victims coming out of the smoke. He personally performed CPR on 8 different people that morning. 8 separate lives that he desperately fought to save, right there with his bare hands on the concrete.
You really get a sense of the sheer physical and mental toll from this extremely visceral quote from Israr Khan himself. He said, "Many were trapped in the basement. Some bodies were still burning, but we used our bare hands. Time is critical in such situations." I mean, wow. He and the other rescuers actually went into that building with the police, 0 visibility, surrounded by screams echoing from every floor. He even mentioned the smoke was so incredibly toxic that he vomited a couple of times during the rescue. But did he stop?
No way. They used their bare hands to pull burning victims out of a basement. If that's not the ultimate definition of putting your life on the line for a total stranger, I honestly don't know what is.
And the acts of heroism just keep rolling in. Take Wasim Raja, another local resident. He went straight into that suffocating building and found two women who were completely unconscious. In a desperate bid to escape the intense heat, they had actually locked themselves inside a bathroom. Now, remember what we talked about earlier? Most of these guests were medical patients who were already weak, so they were likely overcome by that toxic smoke incredibly fast. But Wasim didn't leave them behind. He somehow managed to lift them onto a mattress and physically carry them out of the building to safety. Just amazing.
Which brings us to Section 3, the tragic aftermath. Despite all these absolutely monumental efforts from the community, an inferno in a building with no fire escapes is inevitably going to exact a terrible toll. Mohammed Israr Khan, the man who fought so incredibly hard, had to face a truly heartbreaking reality. He noted, around 5 people we brought out were already dead. The sheer volume of that toxic smoke, the complete lack of ventilation, that single jammed exit, it all compounded into a scenario where, tragically, for some, the community's help just arrived too late. The devastation inside that smoke-filled shell of a hotel was just total.
I think the true emotional weight of this disaster is captured best by this incredibly haunting anecdote from a local pharmacist. He told reporters, "A mother and her child bought medicines from me yesterday. They were supposed to travel to Agra today. I don't know if they made it." That just puts such a deeply human face on this tragedy, doesn't it? These weren't just statistics in some news report. They were mothers, kids, patients just looking to heal, buying medicine one day, making travel plans the next, completely unaware of the structural trap they were sleeping in. That uncertainty, that lingering, "I don't know if they made it," man, that is such a heavy burden for this community to carry.
So all of this leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. When infrastructure completely fails, how vital is community readiness to our actual survival? We rely so much on building codes, on emergency exits, on fast response times from the fire department, but as we saw here in Hauz Rani, a 6-story building can somehow just have one door. Windows can be bolted shut. Sirens can be minutes away while the flames are literally seconds away. In those terrifying gaps where infrastructure and official systems utterly fail us, the only thing standing between life and death is the person living right next door, the shopkeeper with the mattresses, the neighbor willing to do CPR until they physically just can't anymore. It challenges every single one of us to ask, are we ready to be that neighbor? Are we ready to be the guardians of our own communities? Think about that today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a clear, deep understanding of the incredible events in Hauz Rani. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.